we get going, we have some exhibits here on the front table. Chief, I guess you'll lead us to that when the time is appropriate.
Good afternoon. I'm David Stokes, Fire Chief. The gentleman to my right is Deputy Chief Kevin Simmons. I'd like to explain one thing before we get started. You'll see some folks behind me in uniform or not uniform. We started a program this year. One of our goals this year was to try to mentor our captains and battalion chiefs. And part of that mentoring process is we invite them to our staff meetings, and we encourage them to attend functions like this so they have an understanding of how city government works and how fire chief operates, so they can have an understanding of what's going on within the department and how city government operates. So I have some of the folks behind me are captains and battalion chiefs out here just to observe. So I'd go to a couple key issues that's going on, just give you an update on some things. First status is status of Paramedic 48. If you recall, we took made a deal with the county, and we put a paramedic unit in the Annapolis Neck Fire Station, and the county moved their resources out of the Annapolis Neck Station and staffed medic units around us at West Annapolis and one at Woodland Beach. And the rationale for that was that Medic 48, the Annapolis Neck Medic Unit, ran 1,600 calls the year before, and out of that 1,600, 1,000 calls were within the city of Annapolis. So we were losing those revenues. And the other issue was our paramedic unit at Forest Drive and Taylor Avenue was spending a lot of time in the county, and when they're in the county, they can't be in the city servicing our citizens. So we went into this, made this deal with the county. Just give you an update how it's going. Actually, June 1st will be 1 year. We started June 1st of 2016. And the time since June 1st, we have run 222 less calls in the county than the previous year. So those units staffed around us at West Annapolis and Woodland Beach are taking some of the load off our paramedic units, leaving the city of Annapolis. And the other good point about the process is when I did my original estimate to the city manager about this program, I estimated that it would cost us about $180,000 in overtime to help staff that medic unit, and our revenues would be in the neighborhood of about $230,000. I was wrong. That doesn't happen very often, but I was wrong. And it's actually, overtime looks like it'd probably be about $100,000, so I was about $80,000 off. And the revenues are actually far more than we thought. The revenues look like it might hit about $340,000. So the revenues, I think the issue is those 1,000 calls that Paramedic 48 ran, we are getting the revenues off those calls in the city. By our medic units being in the city more often, to transport more city residents, getting more revenues. And Paramedic 48 is also obviously transporting the patients from Bay Ridge, Hillsmere, those areas, and Annapolis Neck, and we're getting those revenues. So my projections were off on both ends. So it looks like so far this is a winner for us. Our transport revenues this year looks like it might hit, if things keep going the way they're going, we might hit 1.5 million. I think last year was like 1.3, Bruce, 1.2, something like there. So we should be up 200,000 in revenues off EMS transports.
That's revenue from the insurance collection?
Yes. So far that's been a win-win for us. It's doing what we thought it would do, what we hoped it would do. The other issue, another thing is...
Could I interrupt you?
Hmm?
What does it cost for an ambulance to do a run, to respond, and then presumably go to the hospital?
What we actually bill?
No. What do you think it actually costs the department? I assume it's generally related to how much we charge, but...
Yeah, we bill $750, and that's probably the going rate. I mean, it's probably close. We figure cost of the vehicle, personnel, training costs, equipment costs,
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you think it's about
It's about that.
the 750?
And the county charges the same fee. It's, 750 is pretty much a norm throughout the country. There are some higher, obviously, but that's about the norm.
Okay, thank you.
In 2016, I'm proud to tell you that we received the International Association of Fire Chiefs Annual Firefighter Safety Award. This is an award presented annually by them for departments that have improved firefighter safety. It's interesting that there are 27,000 fire departments in this country, and we received this award. So a lot of competition out there. We've done a lot to improve firefighter safety. It's been a partnership with the union, the administration, and my office to improve firefighter safety across the board. A lot of that has been supported by your funding of our programs, and I appreciate that greatly, all with the goal of improving firefighter safety.
What was the name of the award?
The International Association of Fire Chiefs Annual Safety Award.
And how many people receive it?
Just one.
Just, we were it?
We it.
Well, congratulations. Seriously.
Got a nice award. It's in our office, and it's very nice.
Wow.
Our ISO rating, we're still working on getting a Class 1 rating. We're currently at Class 2. And again, to give you an insight of that, there's 27,000 departments in this country. Only 1,164 Class 2. Class 1 is only 178 departments in this country. We're knocking on the door of a Class 1 rating. We fell 2 points shy this year of getting a Class 1 rating, so we're very close to getting that rating. We started a program to collect used and expired boat flares and fireworks. The reason we did this is nobody would collect them. None of the manufacturers, everybody didn't want to deal with those, and for years people would bring us expired flares and we would turn them away. I just thought from a safety standpoint, we're better off to collect them and destroy them than having citizens have them sitting in their houses or on a boat and some child get a hold of one of them and something bad happens. So we started this program and it's been very, very successful. People are very appreciative of it. There's a photograph there of what we've collected so far. And we've collected a mess of flares and fireworks. So that's going very well.
Yeah.
The citywide radio upgrade CIP project, that was funded in 2 parts. This year there was $1.7 million in funding. The city manager appointed me the project manager. Just to let you know, the $1.7 million has been spent. We have taken delivery of a mess of public safety radios, 800 megahertz for police and fire. They are being distributed as we speak. The second phase of the project is FY19. It was $800,000 in that phase to complete the upgrades. We actually got some great pricing this year on the radios. The county helped us out. They replaced 2 of the backup 911 consoles in Glen Burnie, which saved us about $75,000. And so we tagged onto the state contract for some of the pricing, for the pricing of the radios, so we saved a lot of money. So it looks like, worst case scenario, we'll probably need about $500,000 of that $800,000 to finish the project. I'm thinking we'll probably only need about $400,000, $350,000. So we should give back quite a bit of money next year, FY19, with this project, because of the pricing we got and the county helping us out some. One of the big things we're waiting on from the county is about 40 of the radios that we have in our fire apparatus belong to the county radios. And that goes back from the 60s when the county, when they first took over communications. So over the years, the county has replaced those radios. They are telling us that they will replace those radios when they upgrade theirs next year. If they do that, it's going to save us even more money. But right now, we're planning. I don't want to give that money up until I'm sure the county's going to do that. But it looks like they will.
So can we go over the numbers a little bit? This was under the capital program,
It's
right?
a CIP program,
And how much was the initial amount?
$1.7 million. That was this
And
year.
For this year, but the total amount was 2.5 or something like
It was
that?
1.7 this year, 800,000 in FY '19, so 2.3 million.
Okay.
So,
And-
2.3.
We're not spending all of it, we're gonna spend about 400K more?
My best estimate is yes.
Right.
If things go the way we think they will,
Right.
and I'm pretty confident they will, we should give back a good piece of that change for that money.
So, Bruce, this will stay in the bond fund, that money? Okay. And this takes care of police as well?
Police fire, the police fire radios are here. We have
Right.
them. The only thing left on the law enforcement side is, there's a couple of odds and ends, but they have to upgrade their 911 dispatch consoles. And we're kind of waiting on the county to make their decisions. The county's supposed to make their decision this coming year, what they're gonna do. But once that's, we're kind of right now kind of in limbo, waiting for the county to make a couple decisions about different things.
And then what about coordination with the other departments?
The other departments, some of the radios we have currently can be bumped down to other departments. They're still workable radios, they just don't have the technology that we need. The radios we have, new ones will either operate on either 700 megahertz or 800 megahertz. Like Maryland State Police operates on 700, a couple of agencies operate on 7, some operate on 8. The radios we have now will do both. One of the issues we had when we went to Baltimore City during the riots is we couldn't talk to a lot of people, and the police couldn't talk to a lot of different agencies. They were either 800 or 700. So this resolves all those interoperability issues.
So Deputy Chief Simmons, this is good for all the emergency management stuff as well? We're coordinated across the...
Absolutely. What happened when we had the governor's inauguration, we had to work arm in arm with the state police and some other state agencies. When it got down to my EOC, they found that their 700 megahertz did not work. So to remedy that, Governor Hogan gave us $30,000 so we can actually change the radio infrastructure down to EOC. So when they come down, they can have the 700 megahertz radios or the 800. So this is a good complement to what's going on, especially for our SWAT teams that are called out in other jurisdictions. They will have that capability.
Okay. Chief, you're going fast, I'm trying to catch up. Back on the flares and so forth, how do we I've got 1 million of them myself that are out of date. How do we let people know about this program?
It's on our website, and it's on WNAV Radio. Does it when they have a boat show, and when they do their boat show, they announce it every time, several times during the show. It's been in the newspaper.
Okay.
It's been out there quite a bit. Somebody knows about it because they bring a lot to us. People turn them in, which is good. It gets them out of a kind of what started this whole thing was, like I said before, we would turn people away. We did it for years. People would bring us and say, we don't collect them. If you call we actually called the manufacturers, and their advice was to take it to the local fire department. So we are the local fire department. So I was reading a story online about a lady that took some flares. This actually was in Canada. Took some flares to a local police department to turn in, but they wouldn't take them. So on the way home, the flare from the back seat, one of the kids accidentally shot one off and burned another child in the car pretty badly. So it made me realize we are much better off, much better trained to take these things and do something with them. We can get away with it, it's because we have a bomb squad. Now, a bomb squad is trained to handle explosives. They routinely collect old fireworks displays, and they go up to the county once a year and burn them. We have a special trailer, which is in that storage shed over the Eastport. It's designed to burn these type things off and dispose of them. So we are trained to do it. These guys are trained to handle explosives. They are trained to dispose of them. So we were in a perfect position to do it. And from a public safety standpoint, it made sense. And there is definitely a need for it because even the Coast Guard wouldn't take them. Nobody wanted these things. Nobody wanted to mess with them. But
Isn't there also a place to fire them off in the backyard on Eastern Avenue in Eastport?
I was thinking like maybe 6th Street in Eastport, somewhere.
Alderman Arnett, some aldermen put this out in their emails to their constituents.
Really?
Other aldermen might wish to consider it.
Moving right along. We interrupted you many times. Where are we now?
We're on the, so one of the goals we had this year was to have a sprinkler work group, to look at the sprinkler issue downtown in the historic district. The city has been kicking this ball around for years and years, and so we started this work group, which consists of city employees, citizens, business owners, it's a mix of people. Right now, Deputy Chief Simmons is the chairman of this committee. We've met several times, and with the goal of trying to find some solution, a win-win for everybody to get sprinklers downtown. One of the things you should know that my concern has been for years is that there are many businesses downtown that do not have monitored fire alarm systems because they've been in place for so long. It's not wasn't required at the time. So there's a couple of them don't have monitored fire alarm systems. So we started this process. So we met several times. It's interesting because we've been kicking around things about giving tax breaks and incentives, looking at grant money and all these different options that are available. So about a month ago, a month and a half, so I was looking for some old documents at fire headquarters, and I was going through a bunch of old boxes. I came across this old box, and it looked like it was just junk. I started to throw it away, and I opened it up and looked at it, and it was a bunch of old overheads, overhead projectors, old kind you write on. And it was actually the old initial fire sprinkler study group that met 25, 30 years ago. And in that package, with all these overheads and all the things that we're talking about in our committee today, they talked about back then. I'm telling you, it's almost word for word. You took the dates and changed the dates, you swear you looked at the same current document. What's even more interesting, there was newspapers articles in there, and I had brought them in the show. The article mentions, I think it's 1998, the first article, when the report first came out, and it mentions basically everything we've been talking about, incentives and different options. And then the second article, which is about a couple months later, is basically where the city says they can't do it, and we shoot it down. So hopefully this committee will have a different outcome than that committee. But that's 25, 30 years old. And it's a very interesting article. I would encourage you to read both articles about this process. So
I'll just read the newsletter from Ward 1. But this is serious. We have still, don't we, Bruce, a revolving fund for sprinkling?
There are two things going on. Yes, we do have a revolving fund. Quite honestly, there hasn't been a whole lot of new activity, but we're also talking about putting piping in to the facilities along Main Street when we repave that. And then doing it like a pilot program.
I think it's like 216,000 left in the fund, but from what we can tell, only one person took advantage of that fund.
Joe Rubino.
Joe Rubino.
I do think this is something, I mean, we're going to fritter around as we have since '97 and probably for decades before and not do anything, and then wring our hands after we have the next fire, which we most assuredly will. And I know Alderman Budge, you and I have talked about this from time to time, and Alderwoman Finlayson as well. I think we need to legislate it, and then we need to provide help, incentives. Chief, you're going to talk about a tax district?
That's one of the things I'm going to recommend to this committee, that we do some type of special tax district. I mean, I don't know what other options we have besides, I mean, we can still do the grants, there's other avenues out there we look at, but for the most part, some of the things we talked about, which is some of the things in that newspaper article, didn't work then, and I'm not sure it's going to work now. So I think we need to go in a different direction. But
What? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this taxing district or other.
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, I think there's different ideas going around that I think the best thing to do is get everybody around the same table because we've been talking about similar initiatives on the capital side. We're talking about similar issues as a function of redoing Main Street. We've been talking about a betterment district, which is not a downtown betterment district. It's a revenue type district. So I think there's a lot of good ideas relative to how we do this. So I think we'd be best served to sit down and go through it. I mean, because I think we're all talking from the same perspective.
But this is budget time. This is the chance that we have to do something about it. I don't know, betterment, tax district, whatever. I mean, I know in the articles here talked about the business persons wringing their hands over the cost of doing these things, but they're never going to do it unless they're required to do it. And then I think the obligation that we might want to take on as the legislative body is to give them some help, tax relief of some sort or another.
And seed money for the revolving fund, which could be part of a bond issuance. Take that money and put it into a revolving fund. It can't be the $200,000 here. It would have to be a significant amount of money to provide the capitalization costs that wouldn't be needed to do it. But absolutely right. I mean, this would be the time to have these conversations.
Before I recognize other alderpersons, Cindy, I think this needs to be another parking lot issue. We need to come back and address this both in the capital, the CIP, and also in whatever other budget is appropriate. But we have done this over and over again and never gotten any further than Alderwoman Moyer or Alderwoman Hammond. Alderwoman Hammond talked about these back in '97. It just seems like we need to do this.
May I ask a question? Chief, in the article, and I haven't had the benefit of reading it, was there a discussion about the obstacles 25, 30 years ago? And are they exactly the same?
Yeah. You could change the date in that article to today's date.
Are the committee members doing any research on different options?
Yes, that's why I kind of like to have this committee run its course, because they're looking at different options. I think, steal his thunder, I think West Virginia, Harper's Ferry just went through, had a big fire back about a year and a half ago. They had a pretty big fire that destroyed a lot of the Harper's Ferry. And they're willing to talk to us about what they did, what they've done since then, and what issues they ran into. At the last meeting, we had Joe Rubino there. He gave us an overview of what his fire, and what he did, and what it cost him to get back on it, and get that building straightened out, and get sprinklers in it, which is very interesting. He had some good points. So we're exploring different options. And I think this committee deserves the opportunity to put some options forward, some suggestions for what they want to do, and I'm hopeful that this body will do a little different from 25 years ago.
How soon will that committee report?
We're looking at having it once the elections is over. So we didn't want to politicize this whole process. So we actually talked to the administration, and we're going to look at something close to Christmas.
Right when we have a lot of fires.
Well, does that mean that the different options that you're looking at will be studied to fruition, and then the report to the council will include, all the details of each of the options?
All the options. And last meeting, we also had
National Fire Sprinkler Association come down from Philadelphia. to meet with us. And they're going to be working with us for the rest of the session.
So I think if we make a decision, we're going to wait until the committees finish their work, but they'll be finished by the end of the year, and then that'll be in time for us to figure out the cost implications for the next budget, and hope and pray that,
I think I hear cans being kicked.
no, I mean, you can get around a table today and have this discussion and
We've
see
broached
what
it.
happens, or you can wait until you have some options that you can consider with all the implications. It's your choice.
Well, I think we're just headed down the path we always go down. We find some reason to defer it, and then somebody will pull up the recording of this finance committee meeting and remind us that we, once again, didn't do something. We've been talking about it, you and I have been talking about it for 10 years.
And do be clear, I am not suggesting that we defer it or kick this can down the road. I'm just saying that we should have all the options explored so that we can make, is that your phone ringing? Somebody's calling saying, you need to do this right
Right.
now.
It's a Main Street businessman complaining.
But do be clear, I'm not suggesting that we delay it, I'm just suggesting that we have all the information before decisions are made, that's all.
How much new information do you suspect this committee will come up with?
I think we're looking at best practices that other historic towns have done, and what issues they ran across. And one of the things that this group that came out from Philadelphia, Sprinkler Committee group, talked about in Williamsburg, things they did in Williamsburg to help them get sprinklers in that historic town. So I think there's options out there. I got my own opinion about it, but I prefer that this committee run its course.
Alderman Budge?
Yeah, I think I'd like to point out that one of the businessmen who complained that it was too expensive and you couldn't possibly do this in those articles from 30 years ago was burned out of his shop a few years ago. I don't know if he would have the same opinion today. I haven't had
It's on the committee.
but it underscores the need to move forward on this program. On the other hand, I'm hesitant to push the committee into going off half prepared and coming up with a solution that doesn't work. I hope the committee is working with all diligence to get us some answers on how to get sprinklers downtown so the council can address it.
Next.
Next. One of the questions you asked me about was the hospital status issue we've been having. So, Anne Arundel Medical Center, or any hospital in the state, has a couple of alerts that they can go on. Red alert, which means they want no cardiac patients. Yellow alert, which is no urgent care patients, or total reroute, which is nobody. So Anne Arundel has, we've been having problems with them going on reroute a lot. So when they go on reroute, then we have to take patients to either Baltimore Washington Medical Center or Bowie Health, or sometimes Easton, which ties up our medical units for long periods of time and impacts the service we provide to our citizens here because our medical units are sitting somewhere else. The other problem is before they go on reroute, a lot of times they get very busy, and then our medical units are tied up at the hospital for sometimes an hour up to 3 hours, just sitting there waiting to try to get a patient off our stretcher onto their bed. So we actually met with on February 21st, we met with the president of the hospital, Ms. Bayless, and her staff, and it was myself and some of my staff and Chief Alan Graves from the County Fire Department, his medical director, and some of his staff. And we had a very productive meeting about the ER, about trying to improve their time to getting their patients off our stretcher onto their beds. Talked about some of the processes in the ER, how they actually process patients and all. It's a very helpful meeting. So after that meeting, we also met later on, the County Fire Department and us met together, talked about options that we can do in-house to try to improve some things there. And the next meeting at the hospital is scheduled for May 4th. But to give you an idea, so from January 1st to February 21st, that's 52 days, and they were on reroute 52 times. So basically, once a day, they're going on reroute back then. Since the meeting, which just so happens today is 52 days since the meeting, they've only gone on reroute 38 times. So they improved. They've done some things different and doing things different to improve. But they're still working to try to get that straightened out. But it impacts us greatly. When we have medic units going to Baltimore Washington Medical Center or Bowie, or sometimes we go to Harbor Hospital sometimes. So they're transporting further distances, which ties up our medic units. So we're working with the hospital to get that straightened out, and Alderman Arnett had asked me about that. So just a brief status for that particular issue. Our smoke alarm policy, the program we started several years ago with the goal of knocking on every door in Annapolis and make sure they had a working smoke detector. This is actually, I think, the 4th year, and we're about 80% complete. We partnered with the Red Cross, American Red Cross, and they have been providing us with the smoke detectors. So it's a very good program, and I just talked to the acting police chief a couple weeks ago, and he would like to join with us and go along with us, and they wanted to do pass out crime prevention material. So as we're checking smoke detectors, they can be doing crime prevention stuff. So it's a win-win for everybody. It should be a good program. One of the things I'm working on, I think this body should be aware of, is the city's adequate facilities ordinance in the city code as far as the fire department is pretty old and complicated, quite honest, and it's kind of used against us sometimes. I don't think it's a very good ordinance, so we're working, one of my captains and I have decided to try to rewrite this thing, and we're working on it. Spoke to the city manager about it, and he's aware that we're going to try to rewrite this ordinance and make it a little more, this code section of the code, make it more true to what we do, quite honest. The current one is actually bits and pieces of NFPA 1710, which is a standard from the National Fire Protection Association about response times. And it looks like they just took like bits and pieces out of it and plugged it into this ordinance, this code. And it's very complicated, and it's not fair to us, to be quite honest. A lot of our responses nowadays, we respond what we call cold response, no lights, no sirens, to certain type of calls that are no longer we consider to be emergencies, but we still respond to. And by responding cold, it cuts into our response times. So we're responding cold to protect the citizens from responding around a 60,000-pound fire engine, lights and siren we don't need to. At the same time, we're working against our own city code on response times. So we're working to update that.
So, to dig in a little bit, and by the way, chime in, obviously what I heard you say is you're going to update, and does that mean also strengthen? And if it's strengthened, will we be hearing from the redevelopment community that we're making things too tough? I mean, what's your sense of where this rewrite is taking us?
I do believe there will be some controversial issues in it, because right now the way that whole section is written and is geared toward the fire side of the house. It only address the EMS side of the house, very little. I talked about EMS response times, but, quite honestly, they could, you could build 2 or 3 more assisted living facilities in the city of Annapolis, and they tax us greatly. And we have no mechanism there to say, hey, this is, as long as the building sprinkler passes the ordinance. So EMS is about 75% of what we do, and it's a demand on that service when you keep adding certain type buildings in the city. So we want to look at all those issues. I know what made me start thinking about it was when he did the school ordinance. Keep building, keep adding people to schools. At some point in time, you got to say enough's enough. You got to do something different. And I thought it was interesting that we looked at the schools, and so we should look at the other side of that equation, how it impacts fire service beyond just a sprinkler building.
So on the EMS side, it would be having enough equipment and staff to have a certain response
Yeah.
time?
To handle more than not, the response time is important, don't get me wrong, but to handle the demand for the service. Do we need another medic unit to meet this demand that's placed upon us?
And then, would we think about spreading the cost of additional staff and services over, say, the fees we're charging for permits, or how would you envision this working?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I haven't got that far yet.
all right, thank you. Sheila?
Just let you-
Alderwoman
May I
Finley?
follow up? When you have to approve or sign off on a project, a development, let's say, do you take into consideration at that time whether we can handle the increased capacity?
Right now, I just follow what the code says. The code is basically response times, and if it's a sprinkler building, it passes automatically. And then there's a response times clause in there.
So for
That's it. So as long as your response time, to meet the response times, it doesn't take into account the demand for service, how many calls this building would generate, and all that kind of stuff.
So should there be something added to the process that allows you to weigh in on that kind of capacity?
That's what I think we want to try to do, is give it some more teeth, but give us some options to deal with it.
In the rewriting that you're working on? Okay, thank you.
Chief, do you know what % of buildings downtown are sprinkled at this point? Sprinklered?
We have all that data from this committee, off the top of your head?
Is that both commercial and residential, or just commercial?
Just commercial. What we look at was commercial. Do you know how many don't have?
I would expect the percentage of residential that are sprinklered to be down somewhere below 20%.
Does that
If
sound right to you, below 20% of residential buildings would be sprinkled? Lower.
Is that 20 or so? You're probably about right.
Okay.
We can find out. We have all the data.
Sprinkler historical buildings, we had 171, 44%.
But not all of those are connected to monitoring?
So, do you know how many have monitored fire alarm systems? We can get that for you. We have all that information.
Is connecting to monitoring a very big expense?
I'm not sure what it costs in a commercial building, to be honest, but you do your house for like $30 a month. I mean,
Right. Just seems like we ought to start doing some things.
Yeah, that's not very high percentage.
Okay.
Do we, well, I mean, I'm probably getting down a little bit deeper in the weeds than I need to at this point, but when we're talking about cost, we're talking about, establishing a fund or doing maybe some tax credits or something like that to have sprinklers installed. But do we know how much it costs to install sprinklers? I mean, it seems to me the cost could be prohibitive in the case of, say, a 3-story residence. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you save a single human life as a result of this, it's money well spent. But just as a practical matter, if I'm a landlord and I have an apartment building downtown, I mean, what are we talking about here?
So part of this committee is we have a sprinkler contractor on this committee, and he went around and gave us a couple of estimates on certain buildings in the city, just to answer that question, to see what it actually was. And they came back, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, I'll be quite honest. I think one was 75,000. I think some of the other ones were like 40,000. The big issue, and I'm not a business owner, but the big issue is from their standpoint is, you have the cost of the sprinklers, obviously. You have to shut down the business for a certain period of time to do that. And a lot of these businesses have, the buildings are leased to other tenants, and that impacts those tenants' revenues, and it's all kind of issues there with the lease. And we talked about doing tax credits, but my understanding from talking to the business owners on this committee is most of the leases, the taxes are included in the lease. The leasing pays the taxes, not the building owner. So you can give the building owner all the tax breaks you want on your private taxes. He won't see it. It goes to the person leasing the building. There's a bunch of little issues there that, I'll be honest, sounds very simple to us. When you start digging into it, it's more complicated than we think. But the sprinklers themselves didn't seem to be too outrageous. It's all the little things around it that kind of make it a little more complicated to get it done. But I can get you the names of the businesses that he did do and what the cost was, to give you an idea.
Well, I don't think that's necessary. I just wanted a relative idea of how many businesses we're talking about. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm just as interested in the residential properties that are not sprinklered, because business burns down in the middle of the night, and hopefully we're not talking about a loss of life if the business is closed up, whereas somebody's house, that's quite different. You as a firefighter certainly are well aware of that, and given the narrow streets and the other impediments we have in parts of Ward 1 at least, could be quite a problem. We've been very fortunate.
It's a challenging city. Sometimes they try to put an aerial downtown in a ladder truck.
Yeah.
Telephone wires. It's a challenging city, no doubt about it.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of things here, real quick. Last year we talked about special event billing, like the boat shows and Navy football and all. This year, fiscal year to date, we've billed for $85,000 worth of special events. What it cost us to provide service to those events, $85,000.
How much of that are Naval Academy or stadium events, do you think?
Each Navy football game cost us like about $5,000. You got it right there. For a football game?
I
Can't hear you. So probably about $3,000 for a football game, so how many football games you have. And then the military bowl on top of all that.
Are we reimbursed for that at all?
We aren't. He
Is
is.
the city reimbursed for that? By in AAA or the Naval Academy?
The AAA does it, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So this last thing on this, well, on this kind of topics is, for years we boasted that we had a 25% cardiac arrest save rate in the city. We've had some great some pretty publicized cardiac arrest saves in the city of Annapolis. But our save rate is down. We're down to about 15%. And the reason it's dropped that much is all the heroin overdoses. The deaths are impacting our cardiac arrest save rates.
Am I supposed to stand up here and do a dance at this point?
Oh, but it's interesting. We had a great save rate, but the cardiac arrest from the heroin overdoses is eating away at our save rate, to be quite honest.
Well, I regret to say that I have personal experience with that, and you folks did just a wonderful job. I wouldn't be here today without the good work of your EMTs, and I sincerely mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's been 10 years in August, but still, I don't care. You know, I'll never forget what your department did for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, a couple things quick. Oh,
He's about to object to what the department did with me, I'm quite sure, but,
it would take exception to that, right?
yeah.
No, I'm just puzzled by the way the statistics works, because we've heard a lot recently about the beneficial effects of Naxalone and saving all of the, a number of overdose cases. So if that is working so well, why are your failure rates going up?
The Narcan works very well if you get there in time. Normally, if you get there in time, you can do the Narcan, you can bring them back. But there are so many calls. I mean, heroin-related overdoses out there. It seems it comes in spurts. I don't know what you know about it, but they lace Narcan with fentanyl,
Mm-hmm.
and if the fentanyl is extremely high in that particular dose, that's what is causing the deaths, a lot of it. So, it's just volume, the volume of calls we have that are overdoses. Narcan, if we get this fast enough, Narcan is fast, Narcan is pretty amazing. But if it's too late.
Well, I understand that, but that essentially says that the success rate of Narcan is significantly less than 25%. It's more like 10%. And that doesn't jibe with what I'm hearing.
That is,
For it to have that effect on your statistics.
so the cardiac arrest rate also includes everybody else,
Yeah.
not just but our success is coming down because of the Narcan deaths, the heroin overdose deaths.
And as you've seen, and you attended
Mm-hmm.
the workshop we had the other day, it's such an epidemic that the governor has declared war on it, to where we're setting up operational center in the state and opioid intervention teams in each jurisdiction. It's that much of an epidemic that they have to actually declare a state of emergency. So that makes a difference in what you're seeing.
Yeah. No, I understand all of that. I'm just questioning the statistics. If the success rate, if your base civilian population success rate was 25%, and the success rate of Narcan was 25%, and it wouldn't make a difference whether you had one call or 1,000 calls for Narcan to your success rate. Your rate wouldn't change. For it to drive your rate down, there's got to be something else going on, and I'm trying to get at what that is.
I can't answer that question, but
Okay.
I'll get you the stats. I can show you the stats.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of things about grants. The SAFER grant personnel are there in fire school right now. They're scheduled to graduate in July. In July or August. We did apply for another grant for $950,000 to buy fire apparatus. That is a 10% matching grant. Those awards should start coming out sometime late this month. So hopefully we can get maybe a fire engine out of the federal government. But we applied for actually two fire engines. So that's kind of those issues. As far as the actual budget, in the enhancements, there were several enhancements, but the city manager and I took care of all of them except for overtime. We asked for additional overtime money, and basically what city manager told me that if I could commit you folks to give me more overtime money, he was okay with it. So our overtime budget when I first came here in 2010 was $460,000. Today is $430,000. We've actually gone down in overtime funding. And in that time period, we've had pay raises and other things that impact overtime. Our training requirements are going up. More training hours is costing me overtime. We try our best to manage the overtime by doing a lot of creative things to reduce overtime amounts. And to be honest, I've just run out of options. I've pulled a lot of rabbits out of the hat trying to make this thing work. But this year we'll probably overspend our overtime by $100,000. This is the first time we've overspent our overtime budget. But there's just too many things working against us. We just can't continue with the current budget unless I come back and ask for more money. So if you can see it your way to look at our overtime budget, I would greatly appreciate it. The other enhancements that we had, Tom and I worked them all out. Had like 7 of them. We got them all straightened out. And the current budget is across the board is a level budget except for the personnel cost increase. We did our overall budget reduced by $11,000, which was just some supply accounts and other things that were changed. So it's pretty much a level budget from last year.
So, sorry, I was doing some calculations, but all enhancements have been worked out except for overtime. Is that are you requiring more overtime than is budgeted?
It's a couple things. One is Medic 8, Medic 48, and that's next station. Adding that Medic unit has cost us overtime. But when I proposed that plan, I said it's going to cost you overtime, but you're going to make money off revenues. So you'll make more money in revenues than you spend in overtime staffing that unit, which so far has happened. We should easily make $250,000 off that venture profit. I hate to use the word profit, but increase revenue. So staffing at Medic unit has cost additional overtime. The additional training requirements that are constantly being thrown on top of us. We did one example is we did the RSI, which is the program where the medics can basically paralyze you to get an airway into you if you have some type of trauma, or they can't get an airway in, they can actually administer a drug that paralyzes. Only certain medics can do that, but that's a very complicated process, and that costs us about 70 hours per medic per year annually. So they have to go to the hospital, has to be done, training is done at the hospital. So that's, it's like, let's say 70 hours per medic per year to do that. So it's a very complicated process, but it's a very life-saving process. So all these different things we've done to improve service have actually cost us more overtime. I said overtime budget in 2010 was $460. Today's $430. We factor in all the pay raises, all those other things that's gone on since then. We just can't maintain pace anymore.
So can you give us a number? What's in the budget and what do you think you need?
I'd like to have 125,000 more.
Okay.
10 minutes ago, it was only 100,000 more.
Well,
Because he's testifying longer.
Well,
Keep talking.
pay raise.
He's on overtime right now.
Yeah. Well, there's a pay raise coming and other things that are happening too as well. So.
Chief, I know in the case of police overtime, a huge percentage goes for court time. Officers have to come in on their day off. They have to come in, stay over after their shift is over, that sort of thing. But I'm scratching my head a little bit that it's reasonable as it might seem that $430,000 or potentially over $500,000 in fire overtime, that seems a little large. I mean, you have 4 shifts right now. I don't think court overtime is a huge factor for the average, EMT or firefighters, although it does happen, but I don't think it's very often. I mean, why so much? You've explained part of it for sure, but it still seems like a lot to me.
The public is very funny. You dial 911, expect somebody to show up. So
That's
we have
true.
We have people on leave, sick leave, annual leave, training leave, you know, all the type of leaves they have. When somebody takes off leave, we have to replace that person. I can't, if I have a paramedic takes off, I can't put the paramedic unit out of service. We'll run it with one person, so I got to pay overtime to staff the paramedic unit. So when all these people use these leave, we have normally staffed with 4 extra people, and the 4 extra people are used to offset overtime. But if you have a person off on long-term disability, you have a person, 2 people off on annual leave, another person off for training, somebody calls in sick, boom, that costs you overtime. So basically, I can tell you exactly what the numbers are.
Do you have the 4-hour minimum that the police have for overtime?
Yes. We actually, we track leave. This is Jeannie, my administrative assistant. Normally Chief O'Malley does all this, but I gave up my debt to Chief Valent. So,
You're stuck with me. So for 9 months, we've used $112,000 of overtime just due to sick leave. And that's just for the 9 months
Okay.
just now. There was a 42,000, well, you got EMTB research,
All the
which you have to
research.
do all the research. So the research alone are $61,000 for EMTB, EMT paramedic, all the training that they're required, and they can't do that on duty.
Okay.
yeah, the special event overtime,
It was 86, I gave you that.
that was $80-some thousand right there for special events. Event
Okay.
Just filled out. But, if you want to see it, I track this overtime like it was my own money. And I can tell you exactly where Don went, who got it, why he got it. We keep our own spreadsheets, and they will tell you, Annie will tell you, I want to know all the time where that money's going, who's getting it, why they're getting it, and how can we change it, how can we make it better. And when it snows, those type of events, we do a lot of creative stuff with people, shifting people around, moving people around. Even with,
Yeah, that only cost us $12,000 this
we
year.
had a light year this year.
Bit like this.
But even things like, we have people right now, the Safer Grant people are at the County Fire Training Academy. And we have people detailed there to help teach that fire academy class. So while that person's gone out of the city for 6 months, I'm paying overtime to cover this spot here in the city of Annapolis. So we do a lot of shuffling of people around, moving people around, some of sleight of hand, you know, this type of stuff to keep overtime down. And they do a great job managing it, but sooner or later it just
Okay.
catches up to you.
Well, thank you for thorough explanation. I appreciate that. Speaking of the SAFER grants, I know that the grant pays the salary of the, what was it, 12 individuals we hired? What expenses does the city incur? Do you anticipate the city incurring as a result of those 12 being hired?
All the uniform costs, all those type of uniforms, safety equipment, all those costs, we board those costs. The cost of providing an instructor to the county fire academy, that cost is being paid by overtime, basically by us. Because we have people detail there. During the course of the training academy events up there, they have, when they do burns and other type of things, they need extra people, we detail people to the academy. And in fact, this week we have 2 people going every day for 4 days. There's 2 bodies out of the city for 16 hours that I'm paying overtime to backfill their positions here in the city of Annapolis. So, while the county, to be quite honest, the county eats most of the training costs because we reason their academy, and the majority of the staff is their staff. You know, our people are mixed with their folks in the training academy class. We still have to help out and provide them some assistance with training our personnel. So when you talk about it from a practical sense, it's a win-win for us, but we're getting the people trained for a lot cheaper than if we had done it ourselves.
Thank you, sir.
But to follow on, that's a 20% increase. And I remember learning from you that it is usually more beneficial to pay overtime than to staff up fully. But with the SAFER grant, I feel like we are staffed up fully, and yet we're also still needing more overtime. And I don't know what pages you have in front of you, Chief, and I'm looking at one in our document, which is it's page 7. I don't know who did the Xeroxing, but it's kind of fuzzy stuff. But it is the fiscal 18 department budget recommendations. And it has a breakdown across the top of expenditures on the left side, EMS suppression, special ops, code enforcement, plan review, public education and communications relations, and then there's this tiny number for emergency management. So I don't really know what I'm looking at here.
$10,000 number? I don't know.
This is in our budget book, and it's, pardon? Okay, well, why is, I mean, first question is, why is emergency management so small if you have the sheet?
That's just his operation.
Well, as Alderman Payon said, this may be getting into the weed time, but we will have to have a time because this sheet is very interesting to me, and it brings up some generalized questions. So I'm looking at EMS. The total expenditures are $578,659. Suppression, surprisingly to me, is more. It's $619,096, and then special ops, which is a big number, $184,693. And I'm looking specifically at the overtime allocations. EMS has $225,000, suppression $100,000, and special ops, which is only 13% of the budget, also has $100,000 in overtime. It also has more money for employee physicals than either EMS or suppression. There are some really interesting things that jump out of here. On the succeeding pages, they have calls for service for EMS and suppression. I may have flipped these. Yeah, so calls for service for emergency management is 8,060, and calls for service for suppression is only 17, not only, I mean, it's a lot of calls for service. In fact, I'm wondering how much stuff we've been burning up over the years, but is 1765. So there's some things here that are hard for me to understand. I'm not saying they're right, but if you did the cost on the basis of call for service, it seems like EMS is a deal of the century. It's 40% of the budget, and when you do the cost per call for service, it's very small. When you do the suppression, it's 43%, but the cost per service, dividing 1,765 into 619,000 and change, and then calls for service for special ops, which I think is mostly the bomb operation. There's 350, but a good chunk of change. So again, I don't know that you have this sheet in front of you and can respond, but at some point when we get into the nitty-gritty, and you know I do. By the way, on the organizational chart, I couldn't find special ops, which may be that I don't have an up-to-date chart, but in any event, there's some very interesting kinds of numbers that are jumping around in here, and at some point, I think it would be good to have some time to dig into these a little bit more.
So you asked a lot of questions. Let me try to answer the ones I can remember. So the first issue about the SAFER grant personnel. All those 12 firefighters we hired have leave. They get leave. So they get vacation leave, they have sick leave, they get, they have families, and they take leave, they get injured. So every time one of them off, I got to pay overtime to cover it. Or we put a paramedic unit out of service, we put a fire engine out of service. That's not an option. I still have to provide service when people take off leave. So in theory, it looks like, well, you just hired 12 more people, but there's 12 more people staffing a ladder truck. Those 12 people have leave, take off, no stuff. To give you an example, every shift work position is 4 shifts, and so you would think 4 shifts, 4 24-hour shifts, every position is 4 bodies, 4 people. To put one person on a shift, you need 4 people to cover all 4 shifts. When the county does it, they hire 5, and the extra person covers the leave of the other people. So that's how they use those 5th person to offset leave throughout the county. And they call them rovers. You have a mess of roving people out there. They send all over the place to offset overtime. We don't have that many people who do that in the city. So, like I said before, and you're right, it's a balancing act between overtime and hiring people. It's definitely it's cheaper in the long run to pay overtime than to hire people, but you have to balance it to the point where you're paying enough overtime to keep it interesting for the employees, but you're not holding people over. Because it's not fun to be held over. The physical question you asked me, the people on the hazmat team get an entirely different physical than the regular firefighters get. If you're on a hazmat team, by OSHA, you're required to have an annual physical, and it has a whole lot more blood tests and a whole bunch more other very expensive procedures compared to a regular firefighter physical. Which difference in cost is, you know, probably here? So those costs are higher for the hazmat folks. So anybody in the hazmat team and the bomb squad guys get much more complex physical than the other folks get. That's OSHA requires that. It's not us. The other issue, special ops. The special ops people are, again, that's the hazmat people. That's the bomb squad. The boat team isn't in that. All the special teams kind of people are molded into special operations. And again, the way we did the budget with this program budget is kind of took people and divided them up best you could where you thought they fit in the category. So a person that's in special ops might be like 25% of his cost is in special ops, 25% is in EMS, and 50% is over in suppression. It's just the way the whole thing worked out. You can't, because very few people are just in one assignment. So if you're a paramedic, you also respond to fires. So if you're a paramedic, you respond to fires. So you can't just say he's all EMS. Well, he's not all EMS, but he also augments the fire suppression. The guy in the fire engine isn't all fire because he responds to EMS calls. So you have some of his payroll or time dedicated to EMS. It's kind of a convoluted thing, to be quite honest.
Right.
I mean, you think it's bad from where you're sitting, where we're sitting. Trying to make the thing make sense when you're looking at it. Some of the other questions you asked. On the chart, there's a special operations on your chart.
Is the United under special operations?
I'm sorry?
If you look on the chart,
Oh.
the time sheet of special operations.
I see, okay.
If you look under that, that's where you see everybody that reports to that division.
Oh, I see, so hazmat, fire, okay, I see it now. All right,
That's all under the special ops guy. Trying to put some other questions you asked.
well, I'm looking at the calls for service, the actual total expenditure divided by calls for service. EMS, the average cost for call for service, if I'm doing the math correctly, is $71.62. For suppression, $350 $526.76, and for special ops, $527.69. I mean, wide variation in the cost per call for service.
Well, part of the issue, well, not issue, but part of the equation, we divide these things up is when you get a fire engine, you get 3 people. You get a medic, you get 2 people. So the third person is included in the cost. The cost of apparatus is much more expensive for fire than it is for EMS. So all those factors, when we do our program budget, are included in that program. So that's why I'll give you an example of one. You got program budget sheet. What apparatus costs. We don't have to break down the apparatus. Right.
The next pages. That's up here, the Chief, I think I admit that I was looking at this while we were talking, so I'm springing it on you, I'm springing it on my colleagues. I think what I might want to do is just sort of, I'll Xerox this page with my scribblings, but send you a missive asking the questions, and we can get to it. I bet there's some things that I'm, like, I don't know whether it's sensible to divide calls for service into the total expenditure or not. I mean, that might not be a meaningful number. I just was struck by what looked like a much more expensive operation moving from EMS to suppression and then to the special ops. And it sounds to me like you're well on the way to explaining at least some of it, but...
If you want, we either do that. If you want to sit down one day, I can show you our breakdown of how we did it. And I'm telling you, it's a spreadsheet. It's
yeah, it
complicated.
sounds like the spider inviting the fly into the lair, but...
No, it is, because
Okay.
nobody wears one hat. They all wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
So it's very even the bomb guys, some of their time is devoted to fire, because they respond on fires as well, and they also respond on EMS calls. The code enforcement, everybody, so it's not, you can't just look at EMS and say that's all paramedics, that's all EMS. It's not. It's fires included in that, a bunch of other things included in it.
Okay. All right. Well, yes, I think probably, I don't know who else on the Finance Committee wants to get into this, so maybe it'll be just you and I, but I do need to understand it.
No, I'd be more than happy to show you.
Pardon? Yeah, right. All right. Other questions from council members? Yes. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, and I may have missed this. Chief, when you were talking about the ISO rating, we missed it last year because of our fire hydrants not being inspected. That has been corrected.
It's being corrected as we speak.
Okay.
So the fire hydrants are supposed to be inspected annually. It hasn't been done for a couple of years. So Public Works is short of personnel, so we are helping them to inspect the fire hydrants as we speak.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
They were in my neighborhood this morning.
Okay, well, and it's as much for the committee because a position was eliminated, I believe, a year or two ago, and that person was responsible for the hydrants. So I just want to make sure that we're aware that we want to keep a position, whether it's your Department of Public Works, in play. I ask this question every year, and that is about your overtime cost and the revenue that's generated by your department that goes to the general fund. Can we see how that balances out? How much is generated by the fire department and exactly what those dollars are? Because I don't think it's fair to charge the fire department overtime if you're generating revenue that should cover the cost of your overtime. So can we
Yes.
See those numbers?
And, of course, one part of the problem is we keep waiving all of those fees too as a council, so,
I don't think we're waiving EMS fees, are we?
That's a different animal.
I think
That's, the EMS transport fees is different from what we charge for special events. But they're
I'm-
talking about both.
Okay, I'm talking about both, though.
Okay.
I'm talking about all the funds that you generate
We
for the city.
can provide an accounting of all the different revenues that any department collects and provide that as the
Okay.
information, so.
Because I just think it would be a fair way to address it. My last question is about the radios. No, I have two questions left. We had worked to get radios so that all departments could communicate with emergency, public safety folks. So will the new 800 megahertz radios or the 700 megahertz be accessible to those departments so that everyone can continue to communicate?
Yes.
Okay. And lastly, when are our gang of 12 going to graduate and be actually firefighters on the street?
July or August?
Our city will be in the firehouse by
September. So they're still not actively engaged, even though they're on the payroll and, you know,
Yeah, they're in training right now.
they're in training. Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. Okay, thank you very much.
when does the SAFER grant run out? Is that next year? So it'll cover this year's budget and next year's budget?
2 years.
All right. Are there any other questions? I know police is back there saying, take more time because there'll be less for us to. Are there any other questions? Thank you, chiefs and other attendant firefighters. We do, as Alderman Payon said, we certainly appreciate the work you do for the community, and I think the community appreciates it.
I don't get to defend my $7,500
Right.
operational budget.
That was going to be my question. Are we ever going to talk about increasing the revenue for your department, or is there no need?
It's the most cost-effective department we have by far.
That's a loaded question too, by the way.
It is a much loaded question. We've been pretty aggressive with the grants this year, and we've done a lot. We've supplied grants to a number of different departments, as well as our own. However, what we're watching is the current federal administration and their cuts coming down the pike. So right now, I can support my budget with the current grants. I get the 3 major grants that I have, and we've been pretty aggressive with getting grants, mostly for other departments as well. But in the future, we will have to actually look and see if the $7,500 will be able to sustain the Office of Emergency Management.
Thank you.
I'm
Chief?
also the acting city manager. Do you have any questions for the city manager while I'm here?
Yeah, where are you?
Cuba.
Cuba.
Thank you very
Right.
much.
So, next is police. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank
Where would
you.
you like to start? Just let me ramble on for a few minutes? I can
Why,
do that.
yes.
Thank you for your
We're
forbearance.
adjourning at 4 o'clock, so if I ramble for 45 minutes, we're good?
Yep.
Thank you for your forbearance, by the way.
Oh, no. So, starting out fiscal year 17, all of you know that we had a number of issues in the police department, from the number of homicides to the number of vacancies, both hard and soft, that have caused some issues with our overtime budget that I'll address in a few minutes. But then leading into the fall, we've gotten, with the presidential election, we've gotten more activity, causing us to pay more overtime that wasn't expected. These are pretty much unorganized, well, they're organized events, but they're not events that are permitted by the city. So they started marching from West Street to Lawyers Mall, and obviously for their safety, we have to put officers on the street. So they stay on the sidewalks, out of traffic, et cetera, and so we're paying overtime that way. Then in February, there was a change. In a short time thereafter, I published a strategic plan for 2017 and 2019, a patrol plan, and 21 new initiatives that, once that was published, everyone in the city council received. The only question besides the Public Safety Committee, that I received was, how much is this going to cost? And my response then, and my response 2 months later, is I'm asking for one additional captain's position, and I'll explain that as well in a minute. So in that public safety plan, we stated that we wanted to improve community safety, we wanted to improve communication and community outreach, maintain our professional standards, and we added a fourth goal, which is improve professional development. Just like the fire chief had his captains, here we are also working on developing a coaching and mentoring program. I think it's very important that we have succession training within the police department. In that 21 new initiatives that I put out in the middle of February, we have 14 that are actually active, already up and running. We have 2 that will be coming to fruition within the next 3 weeks. 2 that have been put on hold. I think that's for the next chief to work on, and I know that you asked me that I start working on that plan, and that those 2 are an advisory board for the police department made up of citizens, and the other is a police foundation. Then we have 3 others that are probably more long-term goals. So also over this fiscal year, we've worked on body-worn cameras. We've tested 4 different vendors. We finally signed a contract this spring. We're going with Taser, also known as Axion. That contract originally started out at $940,000 or $920,000 for 5 years. We were able to reduce that down to $700,000. So I'd like to say that there's a savings of $220,000. You're saying you're spending $700,000. But we actually have those body cameras in the station now. We're going to start training our flex units next week and start putting them out on the street. We are not going to issue them to the department all at once, because I think we're going to run into some problems and issues that if we slowly roll these out, we'll be able to deal with those issues accordingly.
How long do you anticipate it being before the cameras are mostly distributed?
I'm hoping
And of course, put into use.
by the 1st of June at the latest.
Okay.
Certainly by the new fiscal year, we'll be up and running, as long as we're able to see and fix any problems that come across.
Thank you.
Have we sorted out the policies on who gets access to body camera data and when?
We have,
Especially with regards to invasion of privacy concerns and so on.
well, we do have a redaction company, so we will redact certain information, certain faces and things like that. We have worked through, and I don't have my expert here in Detective Truitt, who is the technology guru, but all those issues have been worked out. We spent probably a good 45 minutes today in a staff meeting deciding on how we're going to handle things internally as far as punishment when the camera's not turned on, how far back, whether or not we're going to go back and review and just a whole different, there's a lot of
I know,
things in
yeah,
motion
yeah.
that's why we've only been dealing with 10 cameras for the last 6 months, 6 or 7 months. Those 10 cameras have been easily managed. Now we're starting out, and in Flex, I think we have another 10 or 12 easily managed. And then we're going to, so I'm sure these policies are going to change as we get more familiar with what it's actually going to be.
Thank you.
Do you have your organizational chart in front of you? Because I'm trying to crosswalk staff from the, I guess this is the programmatic budget. We did it anyway, apparently. So I can see patrol fairly easy. That's on the left-hand side of your org chart. And I see 67. I don't know whether those all are, if that's just patrol, because under that there's traffic auxiliary, honor guard, and I suspect like fire, there's you know, some people who are on
There are some that wear
patrol,
multiple
also on
hats.
honor guard and so forth.
Yes.
But I'm just trying to get a sense of where the numbers are across this organizational chart, and again, that's not
So
something.
roughly, we have, in patrol, we have 4 squads of 10 officers plus a corporal and a sergeant. We have,
Okay, and it's in color. I'm on page 9 of police. Okay. That's quite some color. All right, so what we probably, I don't need to have this answered now, but I think if we could get something like this for the committee and probably all the alderpersons,
Is that the one that lists the major and who's with the,
do you want a straight breakdown of numbers for patrol, straight number for special operations broken down by unit?
yeah, but even more, because what I got hung up was, I see investigation,
I think they,
and there is criminal investigation here, and that's 12, but then intel, I see 4.3, but I couldn't find intel here, so I didn't know whether intel was part of investigations or where
Yeah.
intel. So, you know, I always kind of look at, the purpose of the programmatic budget is you see where the people are and you see the amount of money, and then you can see differences when you do a per capita, X number of people dividing X amount of dollars. And then that leads to questions, looks like intel is more expensive, and probably the answer is, well, it's a higher graded people that are in that. So, yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, you heard the kinds of question I was asking Chief Stokes, so you may not want to give me this information. But it would be helpful in
Sure.
order to analyze the budget and get into the details. I mean, part of the big advantage of the finance, the budget operation each year is every year I think we learn more and more about what you do. And I think the more we know about what you do, the more we can appreciate it. And I mean that positively. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. But sometimes it's hard to walk through the way these things are all broken down. So
Sure.
I would certainly appreciate help with that if we could. Let's see. Other
Would-
questions?
would
I
you
mean,
like-
God, you guys are fast. We're done.
I'm not going to offer anything else.
may I ask, did you ask for any enhancements, or was the
silly.
captain the only one? I know I was going to open that can of worms.
So,
You did mention the captain, though.
initially, we asked for a number of enhancements. What we were able to work some things out with finance for some funding for some. What we're still asking for is an overtime enhancement of $150,000, mobile crisis response funding of $110,000,
Whoa, slow down. How
Sure.
much for overtime?
150.
150. Okay. Okay, granted. Next.
Did you say granted? Should ask for more. We're asking for funding for contract services for a mobile crisis counselor. And that's a full-time counselor and a quarter-time coordinator. And that's $110,000 for the fiscal year.
Well, how much was overtime then? I thought that was 110. That was
That's 150.
150, I'm sorry.
ma'am.
Okay. And the crisis counselors.
I know.
110.
It's,
May I ask, I thought the mayor put in his budget the crisis response person.
I'll review, but.
I mean, he said
I
so
do-
in his address, I believe.
Okay.
I know it was part of the 1.25 initially that we're still trying to work out for this year, and I don't know how that carryover goes into next year.
Okay.
But if he did, I'm probably can find a use for the $110,000 for the. And the final request is, Alderman, and this goes to the 21 points, is that captain's position. I think it's very important as we move into community policing, that community policing has someone, a supervisor specifically dedicated to community affairs and community policing. Right now, that section falls under admin, along with communications, payroll, UCR. I think it's completely a different function than an administrative position. My hope is to find someone who's bilingual that can come in and fill that position.
Okay,
Cost.
so,
Sorry, the rough cost is $175,000.
all right. Can you provide the Finance Committee and all the other council members with a brief description of these, the duties? and the
Absolutely.
costs? I don't think we're going to ever have any more money. What was the number for that? 175, did you say?
Yes,
For the captain?
Yes, sir. That's on the high end. That includes the benefits as
Well,
well.
might as well ask for it.
Right.
Because, some of these things are very topical with all of the drug, and if we're gonna move to community policing, we might as well do it right, I get it. And then the overtime is a battle every year. Last year, we thought we had added $400,000 more, but it turns out that just came from the city manager, apparently. That didn't come in as an amendment to the budget. But you got it, so whatever. All right. Where are we in terms of moving into community policing?
Right now, I think we're very much on track. One of the things that I talked about at in-service training with the officers is that this is a new program for them. We're trying to change 20 years of policing, and we're trying to change their mentality. I don't expect that, nor should the public expect that we change overnight. We are doing a number of wonderful things. I don't know if you follow us on Facebook and things, but over the last week, we did 2 pop-up camps in Robinwood and Harbor House, just because they were the kids were on spring break and needed some activity. So we went out there and set up different things for them to do. We currently have a corporal and a sergeant assigned to one half of the city. Each has 4 wards, and they're to work on specific problems and reaching out to the community. In addition, part of the patrol plan is that one squad adopts a neighborhood, one squad adopts schools, so there are 10 schools that are being visited each week by police officers, where they're spending at least 45 minutes to an hour one of their 3 days that they're working. And both midnight squads have adopted commercial centers. So, and finally, we also do park walk and talk, or walk and talk, whichever you would prefer, where everyone is out of their cars for 45 minutes, at least 45 minutes a day, interacting with the public. I was here Saturday night, and someone called out to walk foot in Harbor House. I met with them, and I think we spent almost an hour and a half walking around Harbor House talking to people. So I think officers are buying into it. I think supervisors are buying into it, but it's not going to be a huge leap.
So I was trying to explain this to a constituent over the weekend, and trying to figure out with that constituent, when we have really so few, sometimes, officers on a shift, and they really need to be in or near their car in order to be responsive to calls for service. How is this community service program really going to work? Because I think in most people's minds, and probably mine too, we go back to the notion of an officer walking a beat, and that's the whole shift. Clearly, we're not there. I don't think we have the resources or ability to be there, but we're moving in that direction, and that's all we can really ask. But how do we foresee this working if during the 45-minute walkabout you get a call on your mic and you got to be over so-and-so because of a shooting? How far away from the car do you get? How much
Do you see
have
this
to-
look on my face? Did you just mention something that we don't mention out loud?
Well, for any
I'd love
reason, though. I mean,
Don't jinx us.
there could be all sorts of reasons.
Yes,
that they
there could be all
call
sorts of reasons
Car
why that
accident.
officer would have to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult. We have a really good response time. It's just a matter of you've got to be strategic in where you park your car. If I'm 11 car and my responsibility is Main Street, I'm probably going to park my car in the middle instead of all the way down Dock Street. I should be parking my car in the middle just so I can get there in a timely fashion. But there are enough, if there's something going on, there's enough officers in an emergency situation that can leave what they're doing and respond.
So how many officers for an average shift do we have on duty?
It varies, I would say 15.
Because I know at one point we were down to sometimes when there were 6 or 7.
Yeah. On day work, if you come in at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, that's probably what you're going to find. If you're here 7 o'clock on a weekday, you're going to find more because the administrative officers start coming in to work. So it varies. On Fridays and Saturday nights, you could find as many as 25 to 30.
And a shift is 10 hours, 12
12.
hours? 12 hours. So we're starting with 45 minutes out of a 12-hour shift. Can it be 45 minutes, go back in, and then 6 hours later do another 45 minutes, or?
Well, it's 45 minutes mandated, but they also have these other responsibilities. So you have the 45 minutes of park, walk, and talk, but you have 45 minutes that you got to be in a school, or you have 45 minutes that you have to be in a neighborhood, or so. So, baby steps.
So if we really were going to commit big time to community policing, we would need more officers, probably a lot more officers.
A lot more, but when you look at neighborhoods that really need the officers in them, Clay Street, Harbor House, we already have 2 sergeants there. That's their assignment. With this 1.25 and we're hiring more officers, we'll be able to put more in community relations, more in net, and we're getting there. That's the plan.
So turning to another thing that may help, and we have been remiss at the administration level continuing our bi-weekly meetings with the Housing Authority. I think it's been at least 3 months since we've had one.
One's coming up.
Was it last week or this
No,
week?
it's this week.
It's coming
Wednesday.
up, yeah. I know.
Wednesday.
I think it's
Wednesday, right.
Right. We had begun a bunch of initiatives, including an effective banning list, parking monitoring on and off. The Housing Authority were going to issue parking permits so they can only have residents parking there. On Wednesday, will we hear more about that?
A lot of that falls on Housing Authority, so I'm hoping you'll hear more about it. We are working through our banning policy. We just reviewed this morning at the staff meeting the numbers of who was banned and who should have been banned. still working, so everything's under review and moving in a positive direction, I think.
I'll say a name that I guess I'm not supposed to say, but Chief Pristu said that a lot of the crimes that were committed were by people who should have been on the banning list. I think that would be interesting analysis to get.
Right.
I don't think there's, well, it'd be interesting to see what the data showed and how much progress we've made. I've been very encouraged by the new members of the board, and I think my word is people within public housing are pretty encouraged by it too, but that doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go.
One of the things that we discussed this morning was that our arrest numbers are down in these areas. And I think that goes a long way to the partnership with HACA, with the security that they have there. It's some presence, the presence that we have there, not just through our net teams, but our flex teams and our partnerships with the state police, that I think I'd have to do an analysis on the calls for service. I don't have that, but I know our arrest numbers are down, and we're not seeing the issues that we had before.
Okay, so you will help us get a little, Alderman Payon, you just mentioned you also were having a hard time crosswalking the numbers to the org table, so we can get into a little bit more analysis. And then we've recorded 3 enhancements, 150K for overtime, 150 for crisis response.
110.
services. 110. No, I think it's 150.
Sure.
And 175 for a new captain that will be helping oversee the community affairs, and that person could possibly be bilingual.
Yes.
All right. Are there other questions, comments from? See, police is easy. It's wireless. You got to watch that, Chief Stokes. Joe.
With all the shifting that's has gone on and so forth between the reorganization and in the city itself and in your department as well, what's the status of alcohol inspection, both the regular permit inspections as well as, shall we call it, behavioral response?
We're still doing, the police department is responsible for the behavioral response. We just hired 2 cadets that we are going to be putting out and testing bars and doormen. We know where our issues are. We just want to get them up and running, familiar with the police agency before we put them out. We are working with finance for liquor inspectors. So we're just working with finance at this point to get some liquor inspectors.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Finance.
Yes, we spoke, I think, last Thursday on several different issues. The liquor inspectors came up during that conversation, and it's something I have to quite honestly, reach back to the city manager when he returns and come up with a plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Adequate public facilities came up at the discussion with fire. And there was analysis by an outside group that we don't meet adequate public facility standards because we don't have 3.2 officers per 1,000 or something. Do you remember the number, Joe?
The code says 3.2 per 1,000 residents.
It's not 1,000 residents, right. Where are we with regard to that ratio and/or any potential change in proper adequate public facility measures for police? And I guess I'm trying to figure out how to put this, but we had something recently where a question was raised about whether we were really properly applying the APF rules.
So I know that Alderman Littman has been working with the definition of what a police officer is just for APF, and I provided him a definition which basically said that someone had to be certified by the Maryland Training Commission as a police officer, and they had to be employed by the Annapolis Police Department in order to meet APF standards. Right now, with the additional 1.25 and the additional 10 positions, we do meet that standard with 124 positions using the 2010 census. And that doesn't include the city manager, public works director, or the fire
Correct.
marshals. Yeah.
So we meet APF standard. But that means no new construction or redevelopment can go in place if we fall under 124.
Right.
And I'm sure you'll remind us of that. All right. Any, I like with fire, I may, particularly if we get that other information to help come back with some questions, which when I send these questions, I'll copy all my colleagues on the council, but you may or may not want to pay attention, but they're things that I look at.
Very good.
Thank you. All right.
Chief, how are we on obtaining grant funding in general? I know that my colleague from Ward 8 agrees that grants can be a very mixed bag for a number of reasons, but the fact of the matter is, in the short term, they generally do save us money, assuming that we need the position or the areas that we get a grant in. I think I'm missing a little something here, but
It's a conversation that we've had with the finance department about bringing back a grant writer. And it's
well, I noticed there appears to be at least the possibility of getting any number of grants here in the budget. How do you handle that? Do you have somebody that whose job it is, if you will, to check out any grants that might be available? I mean, if you do, now's the time to do it.
We're in discussion with the finance department at this point and the city manager. It's my hope that I have someone in mind to bring back. It's just a matter of whether or not we can afford to do that. I think that Miss Debbie Hughes has been here before as a grant writer and did an outstanding job. And I'd like to bring her back on a part-time basis. And she's acceptable to that. But we're trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Right now, we have 2 people responsible for grant reporting, but they don't have experience in writing grants. And I'm afraid that we're going to miss out on some opportunities.
All right. Well, at this point, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please?
No.
Because I'm going to let you go next. I'm looking at the programmatic budget sheets, and Captain Amoy, you and I have talked about this many times. I'm trying to understand the units. So, like community relations, 36,000, crime scene services, 500. Is 500 sort of analogous to a call for service number? I'm looking in the sheets that show the breakout. The program. Well, the very first one is 36,000 for community relations.
I think that's actually, should have been, maybe it should be 39,000.
So that's the population of Annapolis?
Population of Annapolis are up in
Right, okay.
relations.
So, okay. So, I guess that can make some kind of sense, although, because when you go to crime scene services, 500 plus.
500 plus crime scenes or pieces of evidence.
So that's like a call for service a la fire department where there were 500 plus crime scenes.
Crime scenes or things submitted to or processed by
And it's 500 plus or minus 50, plus or minus 500.
It's close to the 500 mark.
Okay. So if I did some,
numbers when we were putting it together was at the beginning of December. So I didn't have final numbers by the end of December of what our actual numbers were.
okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, you have to do the best you can do, but then you turn to intelligence, 9,400. I'm trying to get a sense of 9,400 what's.
Well, because it was limited on certain areas within here, we're processing over 9,000 actual, well, now it's over 10,000 video requests per year. And this doesn't include the body-worn cameras. So over 10,000 video requests, whether it be one crime scene, say for instance, a bank robbery. You would not only recover the video from the bank, but surrounding businesses and areas.
Yeah.
And other state highway cameras and such and so on.
Yeah, well, that's important. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
And with the body cameras, that number's going to grow geometrically.
astronomical.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this doesn't also include assistance to criminal investigations. This doesn't include, I think I indicated on here, 800 plus criminal gang, alcohol complaints, and other threat group. Whether they fully investigate or even look into and forward the information and liaison between us and other jurisdictions. It was a low number at 98 camera installs.
Right.
Of course, we just installed the cameras on Clay Street, Robinwood. In the process of Robinwood, we had the assistance of installs in the Newtown community, Harbor House, and Eastport Terrace. Right now, our camera program's well over.
We expect to be about 1,000 cameras we'll have access to.
So that brings up a whole different area of discussion when we talked about this in our meetings with the Housing Authority. You have one person monitoring cameras at this point?
Current one civilian and one police officer who is on a light duty capacity.
Right. So are they monitoring it to detect potential crime?
Absolutely.
Right. So how many cameras are they monitoring?
We look at activity in the neighborhood and go based on that. And then, so they can probably look at realistically 10 cameras at a time.
Actually, more than that. There's probably about 25 cameras visually up on one screen.
Right.
They're broken down into smaller sections. If we know our deployment is in one specific area, that's where they're focused on. So if it was Newtown, we have both sides of the street. You can actually use one video screen for the right side of the street and one for the left side of the street. Same with Harbor House or any other community. With both of them in there, they can monitor exactly who's doing what, where they're going, what they have in their general reach grasp area, and they can dictate that to the officers that are out there to where they are specifically directed.
Right.
It has been very, very successful.
And it's a proactive tool as
It's a
opposed
very
to...
proactive tool, yes.
We've gotten 2 guns in the last 2 weeks off of camera work.
Wow, okay, so it's paying off.
Yes, sir.
But that leaves the question, you didn't ask for an enhancement for more people to be monitoring these things. And how, is there real-time monitoring available from body cameras?
Real-time monitor.
There is capability of real-time monitoring. Again, it goes back to manpower and the ability to monitor, I guess, at that moment. We do have the capability, or will have the capability. If you needed real-time monitoring, a supervisor could generally right onto whatever camera that specific officer and see it from afar, but most of the time, we would like to be out there.
I think we were in some meeting, and I'm not sure if either you were in it, but we had some officers in from elsewhere in the state, and they were talking about an artificial intelligence program that I think NSA might have developed that could key in on certain things to look at. I don't know whether that's...
That was actually brought up at one of our Safe Streets meeting, and somebody sent me an email with a list of different companies that
Right.
I sent to our tech guys.
Is that mature at this point? Is it something we could turn to, or?
We're still looking at it,
Right.
and my guess is the cost is going to be sky high.
Pardon me?
My guess is the cost would be very expensive for something like that.
Yeah, but if it's a staff extender, like if it could be looking at all of the body cameras at one time and looking for intelligent clues, I don't know. All right, but so then pursuing along this line, we get to maintenance and we go from numbers that have several zeros after it to a very specific 3254. But there's no real indication for any of these numbers. Here's one, 43,732 plus. It's hard to know because there isn't, at least I haven't been able to figure out what these numbers actually mean. So if we're going to continue to do programmatic budgeting and use these numbers, it'd be interesting to know exactly what they mean. Here we are back to 36,000, which I guess, oh, here's one that is 39,000, patrol. And drug enforcement is 36. I guess there's 3,000 people who don't.
Well, actually updated at one because the census came in that we are now over 39,000
Right.
residents. I believe the other ones were all turned in for the most part.
Right.
And again,
Okay.
back in the beginning of December, limited on certain aspects of it. 43,000, again, it includes a lot of the records that we're keeping, a lot of the other internal responsibilities of support services within the agency.
Okay, well, I mean, you get the drift. I
Yes,
just,
sir.
it could be helpful to understand better. But now you triggered another thing, and that's record management, the computerized dispatch. I think we in the Capital Steering Committee decided to set that off. I can't remember why or if we did that, but it's still, you have these two kind of very outdated systems that don't talk to each other very well. And
I think we pushed it off for a brief time period to evaluate whether we, I don't know if you remember, the total replacement cost for both systems would be approximately $850,000. We have other options, and what we're kind of holding off a little bit on is what Anne Arundel County is going to do, because we are going into a partnership with Anne Arundel County when it comes to centralized booking, when it comes to their new CAD RMS system that's out for our RFP right this minute. If they came back and it's not going to be cohesive to what we have already in place, we quite honestly just wasted some money. We don't want to do that.
right.
There was another option if we can go a cloud-based to begin with, and I think us and MIT have talked extensively about it, and we just don't want to waste money. We want to pick the best option for right now, and if we just hurry up and buy a new $850,000 system and find out we need to spend $200,000 more, it's just really not productive.
Okay, but we need to keep track of that.
Yes, sir.
But maybe not for this year's budget. Sheila, I'm sorry. Magic works. I'm sorry. We're just about on schedule. Are there any other questions for police? Thank you for being so much easier than fire to deal with.
And better looking.
Any other business for the committee? I would accept the motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Ian seconds it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.